Now, for today's tarot reading, we have an interesting setup. First of all, let me define the positions as we see them. We have the present. We have a potential downside, a potential upside or advantage, and then a potential outcome. So a lot of potentials here to start with. And that just kind of goes as part of the nature of interpretation. So starting out, we look at the present, and we have the Knight of Swords. Now, as far as knights go, we don't have all of them drawn, but we can already make a comparison with this other knight, and we can see both of them as fairly active, but it appears that this one has a bit more activity. It seems perhaps he goes at a quicker pace. You see the knights both have wings, but this one's have been designed for more aerodynamic capabilities, for really racing to get to one place or another. Take a look at this character and remember that the knights involve communication with other areas of life, kind of as we end a cycle, informing other areas, hopefully doing their job well. The Knight of Swords as a sword represents intellect, and it can represent a couple things. Now, in this reading, I think of a couple things. Given his position, we see him moving backward, right? We see him perhaps focused on the past, looking to things and times gone by. Now, we definitely want to learn from the past. We don't necessarily want to repeat mistakes. And if we've learned from the past, maybe we can definitely we can definitely enable ourselves to better position ourselves to repeat good situations, meaningful situations. But in this case, we don't have much past to look at here, and I worry that this involves maybe a bit of overanalysis, maybe a bit of jumping to conclusions, maybe not the best use of one's mental energies. I mean, look at him. He's even got both swords drawn. And he has some racing going on. So, possibly a situation where the mind works a little bit too much. The mind races a bit too much. We might even find ourselves cutting with our words, thinking that we know everything we need to know. Now, from a disadvantage category, we have the Knight of Cups. Now, if he has been informed by our intellectual knight, he may and probably will not serve us well on the relationship or spirituality or reflective fronts. Let's say for a moment that our intellectual friend represents perhaps an anxiety or a depressed, overly self-critical disposition. What would that do? How could that become a disadvantage as this knight rides forth to inform relationships and creative pursuits? Probably quite a few possible problems there, I would think. I mean, if we talk about our relationship with ourselves to start with, one could quickly become one's worst enemy, one's harshest critic. Let that ripple outward. Let that create effects in our relationships with others, in our interactions with groups. How will that affect things at work, at school, in a religious community, in the home? Definitely could cause some problems. Now, an advantage that we do have, Crowley refers to the Four of Cups as luxury. So we do have a luxury here. We do have an advantage to consider. And while we don't always, and maybe shouldn't even often, look to others for answers, we can, and I dare say should, look to others for opinions, for insights. Perhaps this has emerged as a symptom of being a little too close to focus correctly. If we look at ourselves, we might have some biases. Probably do. Could consulting with, say, 4 close friends and or family members, for balance's sake, give us a better perception of our strengths and weaknesses? Maybe the things that this guy keeps our minds racing about at night don't impact things as much as we think they do. Maybe we need to turn this messenger into an investigator. Let's look at some things. Let's get some other intelligence, as a knight might consider it. Do some gathering and get back to the home base to see what that intelligence tells us. I did that exercise a couple years ago, and it wasn't 4 people, it was more like 25. And there were definitely some things that I hadn't thought of that were hugely advantageous in what I was doing. Now, I knew I had some skills, I knew I had some knacks, I knew I had some talents, dispositions, strengths. But there were some I hadn't really thought of. And I knew I had some problems, some weaknesses, but suddenly when other people were mentioning things, they didn't seem as overwhelming. In fact, they seemed like things maybe I could transform into strengths. So do some investigating. Talk with some folks. Use that luxury to your advantage. And in so doing, you'll have used a very creative process. You'll have turned, as we already discussed, that guy into an ally. That disadvantaged card into a friend. The 10 of Wands, a symbol of a completion in a needed creative endeavor. And I can't think of much that becomes more creatively inclined than changing the way we think. Very important, very difficult. But in so doing, you'll look at the word Crowley associates with this card, oppression. In this way, we can overcome some of our self-oppression. We can get past that. We can actively transform that into something useful and productive. And having gone through that process, we can balance on the intellectual creative polarity our anxious, maybe even depressed self-critic, and turn him also, like his knightly comrade, into an ally of ourself and our overall functioning. Definitely an interesting reading. I hope that you've found it as interesting and insightful as I have. I actually feel pretty excited about this. It's given me a lot to think about. Please subscribe so that you get your updates, so that you get notification of updates as they happen. And please don't forget to follow me on the Instagram and Facebook locations as specified in the description. Those get updated a lot more regularly than the YouTube channel, unfortunately, for the moment. Just kind of have to deal with it that way for now. Make sure to share this. Others might find it useful. And finally, please make sure to comment. Make some suggestions. Give me some thoughts. Did I miss something? Did I overemphasize something? Was your interpretation way different? I'd love to hear about it. And I'd love to hear if this proved helpful and how, to the degree that you feel comfortable sharing. I look forward, of course, until next time. And until then, please keep on transforming.